All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jan Erickson from Stepping Aside, and welcome to Somewhat Daily Tarot and Rune for the 19th day of June, 2019. I'm going to get this right eventually. This is like the third time I've started. I keep screwing up on the date. Anyhow, if this is your first time here, this is just how it goes sometimes. Anyhow, thank you so much for coming by. If it's your first time, welcome. Please click subscribe. I'd love you to do that. I know it's like, oh Lord, why would I do that? The woman's crazy. Anyway, and if you're coming back, thank you so much. I appreciate you all so much for being here as we explore tarot and runes together and see how it all affects our life. Lately, though, I have to tell you, we've been in this trend with the cards where we're moving away from an us versus them experience and more into one that is shared, returning to our true nature with one another of harmony and oneness and unity and all of that. I mean, it is our true nature. We are the creator focused into form. We couldn't be separate if we tried, although we certainly make a go of that, don't we? Here on Earth, we in our bodies, we sure try to think that we're separate from one another, and I think that's where that whole us versus them dilemma comes. And we've been dealing with this whole thing ever since we came into being. This us versus them mentality, whether it was the slaves versus the overlords, whoever they were, whatever planet they were from, or what it was, and then when it was just us, assuming it's still just us, but when it was just us, then we continued that whole dichotomy of someone having to be in charge and someone having to struggle against that, not understanding that there needs to be a more egalitarian way of doing things. And so I think that's what the cards and the runes are showing us, that that's where our home is. That's where our true reality is in unified consciousness with everyone. Like I've said before, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we like each other all the time. We don't. It's fine. We can, have all kinds of debates on where we should go with this or that. There may be lots of conflict and everything, but what there still remains when all is said and done is a shared purpose, and that's the part we've lost. And that's, I think, what the cards and the runes are starting to tell us, that's we're tired of it. It's exhausting. That whole hate stuff, the racism, the all of it. It's just too much. It's just too much. And I think that we're seeing a return to balance, basically. It's not utopian necessarily. I mean, I suppose it could be. The more we ascend into our own spiritual awareness and all of that, I suppose it could be. But it doesn't have to be. It could just simply be that we don't lose sight of our shared purpose together. That's all. We could argue all day long. We just don't want to lose sight of that. Well, let's get started and see if we can keep this trend going. And hopefully, we won't see any bumps in the road today, but we might. But we'll use those as challenges to grow. How about that? So let's take the first card. And as always, I take the 13th card. I was born on the 13th. Lots of things happened to me in 13s. I was telling everybody one day, a couple times, that I used to wake up, and this was happened for maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe, every single morning at 3:13, and I couldn't figure out what the heck I was, numerologically, that's a 7, so I'm thinking, well, magic, okay, witch up and all that. And that's true. But if you think about it, it also is the numerical representation, depiction of the 7 or of scales. So you've got 3 and 3 and 1, and I'm to be that 1. It's considered the 4th ray in the 7 cosmic rays, and that's harmony through conflict. So as a Libran, I'm supposed to be the resting point and a balance, right? So I think that was just reminding me of that. I don't know why. I was probably out of balance. And it was probably leading up to when I got sick, actually. That's probably when it was. Because that started happening in the latter 90s, and then I was sick for 13 years. So really sick. I was actually sick longer than that. I have RA, and although I'm in clinical remission now thanks to cannabis, so I did in 2.5 months on cannabis concentrates what no doctor could do in 13 years, and I healed. So there you go. And we're talking about all this balance. So and then what did I draw? I drew the high priestess. And here I'm going to put the cards down so I can show you here with my other hand. Here we have the running theme of pillars. We see them in various forms. They could be towers, they can be trees, but it's the idea of on a balance on either side. It can mean a doorway into new experiences. It can be harmony between dark and light. These are actually the pillars at Solomon's temple. The 2 denotes balance. It denotes decision. You see up here, you see the depiction of the triple goddess right here in her crown, or her headdress, actually. She has a cross on her chest, signifying not religion, okay? What it's signifying a balance between the vertical plane and the horizontal plane. So what we were talking, I don't remember if I talked about this before, but when we're talking about polarity, what we're doing here is we think of it in terms of balancing masculine and feminine within. But in truth, if you cannot balance spirit with form or ego or personality, then the horizontal part of it is not going to happen, all right? And because we've lost sight of who we are spiritually, that's likely why we're having a difficult time now with the us versus them aspect of life. We're focused on that instead of understanding that that's an illusion. To see everybody as the other instead of the other side of self, to have the patriarchy be what it is, to be it so strong, and it's rearing its ugly head now, so much so that women are no longer safe, not in this country, probably not in the world, where the whole white nationalism aspect of all of it is part and parcel of all of that, where we see people as the other and we fear them, they're not one of us and all of that. And that's what's really happening here. And so the polarity, both on the vertical and horizontal plane, is completely off. But it doesn't begin on the horizontal plane. It begins on the vertical, where we understand that spirit needs to inform us that we need to behave and act and make our choices and see our experiences through source vision and not through the vision of the ego. So that's the meaning of that cross, at least in my estimation. She's also holding a Torah scroll. She's got her, I'm not sure which foot, because it kind of looks like her legs crossed there, but one of them is sitting on top of a crescent moon, which I would interpret as in her maiden phase, which tells me that the high priestess is somebody that is about beginnings. She's about balance. She's about intuition. She's about the spirit within, essentially. She's kind of the counterpart to the Magus. She's an expression of the feminine divine. You can see the pomegranates, I think, above her. And I'll bet if you could see behind her, what they would be depicting the tree of life, although you only see the top part of it there. In fact, I think that it could be that the moon right here is representing that same position on the tree of life. Because if I remember right, and I hope I get this right, I'm going to check. I'm going to double check and let you know tomorrow. But I believe it's either the first 3, and then there's the line to the abyss, or there's another one, and she may be, and the high priestess may represent that fourth globe on the tree of life. And I don't, but I think that I want to say that the line of the abyss happens before that point. So then she would, I think it would be, then this would be the first one below it, where we've taken the dive into the abyss as the fool into manifested form. So where the magus is the individual who basically is that alchemical process, here the high priestess is doing her part to bring in the depth of the whole experience, to actually give sustenance to the alchemical process begun by the magus or the magician. So she possesses secret knowledge, then intuition, perception, inspiration, revelation, inner wisdom. In a sense, she's the gateway to the unconscious realm. Okay, so again, the fool takes the leap into the abyss. The magus is working his magic, or the magician is working his magic, with all the elemental aspects of form and who we are coalescing into form. And then the high priestess finishes that process off, and then the empress gives birth to the world. Okay, you see how that at least this is how I see this. And then the emperor, depending on the type of deck you're looking at, is either someone that's looking back at the empress for guidance, because of course he can't stand on his own. He's just her consort. She's the one with the power here. Okay, she's the one with the power. And if he's not looking back at her, he's just usually looking perturbed. He doesn't, like he's just all about himself. And without her, he lacks the depth. He's all the external, and she's the internal, right? So in a sense, the empress and the emperor are the masculine and feminine polarity, right? That we're trying to balance in form. But first, we need to deal with the relationship between the magus and the high priestess, don't we? Energetically. And that, I believe, is the vertical plane. As we're trying to manifest all of this, then the ego takes over. It's like, oh no, spirit doesn't exist anymore. The parents are out of the room, in effect, right? Let's draw another card. Well, another soul archetype card from the major arcana. The major arcana is a soul archetype, are our soul archetypes. And then the minors and the court are just basically about our mundane existence. I mean, you could theoretically do a reading with only major cards and that'd be fine. I think in the beginning, that's all they had. Well, here we have the 7, the Chariot. And again, more about balance. You see the king there. You see the very large star in the center of his crown. You see the stars on the drape that's over the top in the back part of the chariot. He's holding a staff or a wand in his hand. You see the dreidel. You see the winged sun above the dreidel on the shield. You see the dark and light there, the sphinxes, the lions. You see the castle in the distance. It's very large. You see one on one side, one on the other, towers on one on the other. You see the 2 wheels kind of acting as pillars, contributing to the balance. Chariot is about when to take control and when to allow. It's about everything's moving along well. But here, they're just kind of sitting. That sort of represents the notion of the 4th cosmic ray of harmony through conflict, and that's knowing when to allow and when to take control. And so that's really represented by the Chariot, which makes sense that it would be the 7th card of the major arcana. So right now we're looking at, numerologically, we're looking at a 9 energy. Today we have a 1 energy with a 19 that reduces to 1 to 10 and then 1. And then you're looking at new beginnings. And so again, coming back into balance would be a new beginning, wouldn't it? But it's a balance between spirit and ego, not necessarily the polarity, between masculine and feminine within. That it's not that. because I really believe that once we get the spiritual part of it down pat, the rest of it's just going to all fall into place, because then you see things differently. And pretty soon that us versus them reality that we live under just goes away. You're like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. I'm not doing that. It's hard. I've always thought these things since I was a little one, since I was a wee one. I've always thought this, and no one's ever been able to tell me any different, right? So I get older, and I start studying, and I start, reading all these esoteric texts, and all of a sudden I find out, oh my goodness, there's all this body of thought that seems to support what I think, and that I've always believed. Nobody told me. I just believed it, right? It's like, no, that doesn't feel right. To be mad at that person because they're a different religion than you, and oh no, that doesn't feel right. To be afraid of that person because they have darker skin than I do. I mean, good Lord, I what is the first thing I do? I go get a tan. Why would you ever be afraid of somebody's skin color? I don't get that. I don't get any of it. We're all one family. And I'm so happy that the cards are still telling us that. The other thing about the 7 is the notion of just laying down arms. Sometimes you can get into conflict, right? And there's just no solution. Everybody just has their own opinion, and nobody's going to come together and agree on anything. And sometimes, then you get that expression, well, then we just have to agree to disagree. But at some point, then you got to come back together when you've agreed to disagree, because you're not saying, well, not only do I disagree, but I never want to talk to you again because we've disagreed about this. It's like, well, that doesn't work either, does it? So I don't know. I think that the 7 itself is basically telling us that we have to come to a resting point and allow all that to come to balance and just let it all settle out, and then see what we have, right? So when I look at the Chariot, even though, some people say, well, it's about motion and even progression and all of that, well, they're not moving anywhere. They're letting things come to balance. They're letting things settle out, Theoretically, if he's been in battle or something, now he's coming back. He's just letting it all just settle out. So I actually prefer the interpretation, knowing when to allow and when to take control actually is the better interpretation of the Chariot, at least for me. And then we draw the Queen of Pentacles. I love the queens. Not so fond of the kings, but I love the queens. I think it was yesterday that I was sharing with you that I'm part of that whole, on my paternal side, when I did my ancestry, I found all this. I was looking for witches, and I found them. But I also found the royalty and the Merovingians and the Sinclairs and, the Bruces and the Druids and, all of it. Okay. Once you get into that line, you're in that line, and it's everywhere, right? Well, I was telling you about my 14th great grandmother who was burned by King James IV, who is either, I think he's a great grandfather. So it's like I had people on both sides. I had people doing the burning. King James the Sixth of Scotland. He was also King James the First of England. 100 years later, started the North Berwick witch trials. And again, I had people on both sides of the equation. So it's an interesting thing to know that about your family, about your ancestry, that they were responsible for the worst things that ever happened to all of us. And yet, on the other side, my family was also the victims of it. So it's a weird thing to look at and to read. But that's why I don't like kings, because they're not very nice people, and I'm related to them, and it just really bothers me. It's like, oh, come on, get over yourself. You're not all that in a bag of chips. In other words, you really aren't. And so anyhow, but the queen, on the other hand, they could be just as ruthless. I had there were who was it? Was it Eleanor? There were 2 Eleanors of Aquitaine. the grandmother and the granddaughter. And those women, if you read about the queens, they worked them. They did. And they made sure that they were taken care of and that they were protected. And of course, until they got thrown into the Tower of London for witchcraft. And then, that was an issue. But they didn't die there, at least. But anyway, this is the Queen of Pentacles. And I love this scene. She's just sitting very quietly. She's in a receptive presence. Pentacles is the card of earth, the earth element. You can see all the greenery around her. You can see strength with the oak leaves. Her strength is found in her compassion and in her grounding. It's in her ability to see beyond the moment and to understand her legacy. She's looking down at the pentacle, the large pentacle in her hand. That's her legacy. It's her wealth. It's her kingdom. It's the people it's her subjects that she rules. You could also think of it as the mother in the family. And she's everything seems to be in its place, though, doesn't it? She's not in conflict. She doesn't seem worried. Everything is just calm and in balance. It's like, at night when everyone's home and the kids are where they're supposed to be, and everyone's mom and dad and the kids are sitting down watching television or whatever, or whatever family structure you have, and you're all sitting down watching TV together, and it's all quiet, and everybody's just there, in everyone's presence, and everyone is where they're supposed to be. When people in my family aren't where they're supposed to be, or something isn't right, then I'm not right. It's just that simple. If there's conflict, I'm not right. Just not. Let's do one more card. And we'll see just exactly what she has to, we'll see if we can get a little more information about what this queen has to do with the two major cards having to do with balance, both inner and outer. Well, I drew another queen, the Queen of Wands. So what I'm going to say here, I think that we're talking about goddess influence. She's sitting there on her throne. We'll compare the two. They're both sitting on their throne. You can see the earthiness of the Queen of Pentacles throne. I just love that throne. I just think that is stunning. And here you see the power behind this queen. She's got a little more active presence, doesn't she? She's got her sunflower in her hand. She's holding her staff, with authority. You see the lions above on the back of her throne, but you also see the sunflowers. So that's vitality and energy. You see the two lions on the side of her as her arm rests on the throne, and you see her cat looking inquisitively at us like, what do you want? Like, what do you need from the queen now, In fact, let's put the majors on the inside, and we'll put the queens on the outside. We had this happen, I think it was last week, where we were surrounded by queens. I think it was last week. Might have been the week before. But we ended up being surrounded by queens. We had a 4-card reading, and I interpreted that, and I'm going to continue to do that here. I'm going to treat them as major cards in that respect, because what we have is we have to balance will with the mundane. And we've got to do that in balance. Now, if will is out of balance, then obviously maybe we're going to behave in ways that are oppressive. And there are ways that maybe don't listen to others, dismiss others, oppress others. The authority runs amok, basically. Now, on the Queen of Pentacles side, we can be too receptive, right? We can be too receptive, and maybe we don't set the boundaries we need to. But when everything is going well for us, the earth element, and we're expressing the earth element appropriately in our lives, then we're setting boundaries. We're getting things done. We're taking care of business. We're extending compassion and love, and extending a shared experience and embracing a shared experience with others. So you can actually see here, if you look at them that way, then you're looking at what the high priestess and the chariot are actually trying to say to us here. So in a sense, you could actually look at it with this way. You see what I'm doing here? Okay. So these would be the horizontal plane, the pentacles, not the pentacles, the court cards. Now I'm all confused here. That's not the court card. Here's the court. So then you could say then that this is the horizontal plane. Actually, we did it this way. Balancing masculine with feminine. This would be feminine. This would be masculine. This would be receptive. This would be projective. Okay. Put them back down. I tried to do all this in one thing, but it's just not going to work. So I can't hold all of them at the same time. So I'm not that coordinated. Anyway, but here, well, it would be this way. Actually, this way. As above, so below. Bringing the awareness of spirit into form. Okay? That's where I'm getting all of that. So let's do a rune, though. So that's what I think we have here. I think that we have an expression, and we can either put the queens on the outside or leave them on the inside. It doesn't really matter. Either way, we're showing, that coming into balance, both spiritually and physically, needs to happen. But I will tell you again, it's the spirit, that is weighting most of this because of the major arcana cards that we started with. The High Priestess of the Chariot is basically telling us that it's spirit that has to be balanced first. We have to become aware of who we actually are, and then let all that inform everything else. And when that does, it all just sort of falls into place. Fehu, first rune of the Elder Futhark. We haven't had that in a while. Known as the sending rune, it can be used in bind runes to send the energy, basically, to invoke the energy that you're trying to cast. When you do a bind rune, you're doing anywhere from 3 to 5 bind runes, 3 to 5 runes together, and you're combining them together, and you're creating a symbol. And the idea is that all those energies are supposed to represent your intention you're trying to do. So if you had a healing bind rune, I mean, you can do them. You could use Birkenau, you could use Yira, Isa, maybe. You could use a lot of different ones if you wanted to choose them. But I always just set the intention and just start pulling runes out of the bag, and whatever comes up is right, and it always is. So anyhow. In fact, I just did one on the blog. If you want to go over to imsteppingaside.com, it's stepping aside, and look at that, you'll see that bind rune for unity consciousness. I did that. I think it was last Friday, Friday, I think, or I finished it on Saturday or something. Yeah, I think it was Saturday. I finished it, but I burned the bind. I always burn them onto well, just like I do here. I just make my own runes, unless they're crystal. I don't do that, but my wood ones I do. But anyway, Fehu is a sending rune, and it basically means cattle, movable wealth, which is kind of odd, to start a divination method out that way with the very first rune being about cattle, but that's what it is. It was at a time when all of a sudden, the tribes were moving; they weren't staying in one place, and they had their cattle with them, and so they could take them with them. They could take everything with them. Suddenly, their legacy and their assets, and all of a sudden, became mobile. And so it talks basically about that type of movement. And that's, I guess, where you get the notion of it being the sending rune for that type of energy. But yeah, it does. It hastens affairs along. It attracts wealth. Protects valuables. And what is the most valuable aspect? Is it the tangible objects that we possess, or is it our spirit? Is it the truth of who we are? The positive rune. You can use it to achieve success. So I mean, it's just something that's just basically motivating, okay? And so it's sending the energy in the direction you need it to go. So if we're casting the intention of balanced polarity, both vertical and horizontal plane type of polarity, not just the horizontal, but the vertical as well. If we're talking about that, then it basically gives us the energy and the wherewithal to accomplish that. Let's do a geomancy rune as we drop one on the floor. Well, it was fire and it was a single dot, but that's not going to matter. If you've never seen geomancy done, it can be done a variety of ways. I choose to do it this way. I have 4 runes. They have 2 dots on one side, 1 on the other. They have and on the side with the single dot, it's assigned to an element, and so there'll be fire, air, water, and earth. That'll be the order I'm going to put them in, and it's going to create a glyph that has dots. It's comprised of dots, and it's going to be 4 levels of them. All right, and it's going to create something here, and hopefully it will give us some additional information. Sometimes it's okay, don't forget about this is the type of information it gives. Excuse me. But I have a single dot for fire, a dual dot for air, a dual dot for water, and a single dot for earth. Now that's Karser. Karser is considered evil by geomancers of old, but you know, they were guys, and I don't know. Narrow thinking. Karser is about self-imprisonment, so you can see where it might be an evil influence. But when we don't keep things in balance, we're basically imprisoning ourselves in the ego. And I think that at the heart of all of this, and the premise for all of this, and the reason for all of this that we're doing here, and for the cards today, and this running theme toward rejection of the isms of life and the us versus them experience of life, and coming back together in a shared experience, is because that imprisons us. To consciously see the other imprisons us. It shuts down anything that we could have experienced with that individual that could have brought such joy and enlightenment to our lives, such awareness to our lives. But no, we're not going to talk to that person because they're different. They're the other. And that's a form of self-imprisonment. So again, sometimes when I do the geomancy rune, it's part of it, but it's maybe the underlying, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is why this is happening. We're rejecting the Karser within, the self-imprisonment within, and we're moving back toward unity consciousness. Maybe. I think so. Anyhow. That's pretty cool. I mean, we can either put the queens on the outside and the majors on the inside, or right now I have the high priestess and the chariot, as the boundaries here, because I think spirit needs to be the boundary here. I think awareness of who we are as spirit is the only task we have now, really. Once you understand that, once you accept that, once you know that, who you are, it changes everything. You really cannot see anyone else any other way at that point. How can you? How can you be spirit and I'm not? I'm spirit and he's not. No, we're all spirit. We all just need to allow that to resonate, let that vibrational truth resonate instead of the egoic, being at odds with everybody and hating everybody, and oh, well, he doesn't look like me, and oh, she doesn't look like me, and oh, they have a different religion, or oh my goodness, they're gay married. Oh my goodness, heaven forbid that anybody's happy and anybody finds somebody to love in this world. So yeah, you got to define that for everybody, don't you? But see, we're defining it downward, and we're expressing Karser in our lives when we do that. When we spend our time in judgment deciding, oh, you can't do that. No, you can't be that. And you can't have that. And that's ridiculous. And it really, really illustrates how the will can really get out of control. And all of a sudden, all you see is your own single-minded vision. You can't see anything else. So, and that's the imprisonment, the self-imprisonment that Carcer's talking about. So go forth, release yourself from the imprisonment within. It's a choice. It's not a reality. It's just a choice. It's an illusion. So anyhow, well, cool. I guess that's it. I have to. I'm doing pretty well on time here, but I got to get ready. I have to go to a naturopath's office and get some acupuncture done. I haven't seen her yet. I'm not sure which naturopath I'm seeing either, but they both do acupuncture, and I'm gonna go see those folks and see what they can do to my elbow, maybe to increase a little more healing in my elbow. It's pretty damaged from the RA, and also my knee. I fell and tore the meniscus in my knee, and then when I went in there and had the X-rays done, I discovered that there was a small tear on the outside one, not just a huge one on the inside one, and I know when that happened. That happened in karate class. Um, my husband was the head instructor, and my husband's knees are calcified, basically. He's a mechanic. He would be, being down on his knees on concrete, Plus, I mean, just over time, he's a guy who just gets down on his hands and knees and works, So his knees are somewhat calcified, and so if he comes up and does a knee check against your knee, it's almost like a strike. It's almost like he's got blades in there, So I know he did that. I mean, he didn't mean to do that, but I mean, it happened in class. See, it probably black belt class. He came up, he checked my knee, and then ever since that time, I have this little burning feeling there sometimes, right? Well, it turns out it was a torn meniscus, and I didn't know until 2003 when I fell, and this happened. So they're wanting me to get more out of my OneDrive. Interesting. I don't want to get more out of my OneDrive. Anyway, so I'm going to have them do that and do a little acupuncture and see if they can't maybe increase a little more healing in there. Reiki works, Kanzawan's work, but I just, cannabis oil works, but I just need to maybe have a little bit more. So I'm going to do that today. So I need to get going and get ready and go there. And I'll tell you guys tomorrow how it went. I've had acupoint therapy before. That's electrical. It's electrical stimulus in the same meridian, so it's a type of it, but it's not the needles. And that was so very cool. That was back in the 80s, though, and I haven't had it since. And that was so very cool. I mean, that was just amazing. So anyway, I'm looking forward to this today. I think it's going to be cool, and I'm really hopeful that it's going to increase the circulation and healing in my knee, open up the meridians a little bit, get things flowing a little better. And also the same in my elbow. Maybe she can do something with that. So, but I'll let you know tomorrow how that went. And if any of you have had acupuncture experiences, you want to put them in the comments, do that. I'd love to see what happened with you and how it worked for you. I'd love to know. So anyhow, we'll see you tomorrow, though. Be good to yourself, be good to one another, and blessed be.